You... Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream, radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about, and I've done a number of vids on this, Indian immigration to the West, and in this instance, Australia. Well, what brought it up was just recently, just days ago. I think it was Indian National Day or something like that in India, and the Australian white politicians were literally tripping and falling over themselves to fawn and grovel to the Indian diaspora, of which there are now many, and more coming in Australia. So they decided to light up the, among other things, flying Indian flags everywhere. They decided to light up the Australian Opera House, or the Opera House in Sydney, with the colours of the Indian national flag and the Indian national symbol on the Australian Opera House in Sydney Harbour. Now, I guess I don't mind. Australian taxpayer dollars were spent on it, and the politicians just seem remarkably keen to do it. But are those same politicians just as keen to help assist or ask or exhort Indians here to integrate into Australian society? Well, no is the answer. In fact, Australian politicians fall over themselves to help and assist and aid and abet and shore up the Indians' desire to keep a completely genetically pure, homogenous Indian society in Australia, and the idea of integrating into white society is seen as just, that white people are so morally inferior, culturally inferior, morally inferior, spiritually inferior. Why would such superior people like the Indians want to integrate with low-life folks like that? Now, Indians are probably the least likely to, of all the races that come here, least likely to intermarry with local white people, or any other people for that matter. But given whites are still the majority, that they don't want to integrate with local white people. And if they have anything to do with white people, it's almost under sort of semi-sufferance. I suppose we have to tolerate them. Indians that emigrated from India in 1860 or in the 1850s. So we're talking 160, 170 years ago. So they've been, 5, 6, 7 generations outside of India in Western countries. They still will only marry other Indians. They still send back to India for brides and husbands and so on. And the family pressure that is on anyone that might be thinking of, say, marrying a white guy or a white girl or something like that, that they're threatened to be, that will disown you, no one will ever talk to you again, you'll be an outcast, you'll be cut out of the will, and so on and so on. So the withering pressure is brought to bear on anyone. Not that many choose to consider that path, but the very few that do are dissuaded very quickly. And there's, they still have this brides that are betrothed, husbands and brides betrothed when they're 2 years old, and all that sort of stuff, and the ancient dowry system and the like. But the Indians don't want to integrate, and so why do they come to a white country? Well, to take money from white people. There's no other reason they're here. India is a dirt poor basket case country. It's like $1,500-$1,600 a year is the average income. Now there's a small elite of measured in the tens of millions. There's a small elite out of the 1.442 billion, I think the population is now. That small elite do very nicely, thank you, and they're very nationalist. And for example, if Rishi Sunak, the Indian or genetically Indian guy who was given, not just, he wasn't just gifted, he was almost grabbed off the street and thrust into multicultural virtue signaling into the British government or the Conservative Party, and then the British government. If he does not get the prime ministership, according to the Indian nationalists, this is, if he does not given the prime ministership in England, of Britain, of the United Kingdom, then that just shows that the British are bigoted, racist, fascist Nazis. It just shows it proves it. It proves it because white people have to prove they're not racist. And the only way they can prove they're not racist is by having the entire government of the United Kingdom made up of black and brown people. And if that doesn't happen, then they're Hitler. Look, it's that simple. Now, does it work in reverse though? Like say, I don't know, maybe all the, if Japan, for example, they should have all white people running it, or any other country, should they have all white people? Well, no, it doesn't work in the reverse. It's only white people who are fascist Nazi Hitlers. And so that's how it has to be. And the Indian press is extremely nationalist, pushing Indian interests and insisting that Indian feelings are being hurt and injured left, right, and centre. But if white people are nationalists and think that white people should be in the white country's government, then they're fascist Nazis, and it's just that simple. Nothing more to discuss. Now, the Indians, in terms of their desire, that they desire to come to the rich white countries, whilst at the same time believing those same rich white countries are again morally, spiritually, and culturally inferior. Now, you can have a conversation with pretty much any, and most, particularly the upper class Indians, and they'll say, well, the West is, better run, better managed, it's cleaner, it's less corrupt, and they'll tick, endless amounts of boxes about why the West is good, but still insist that it's terrible and it's racist and it's bigoted and it's culturally inferior, and so on, so that they still see themselves as chip on shoulder, sort of wounded victims. And no one forced you to come to the West. Well, why are you here? Well, why did you come here if you think it's so bad and so terrible on one side, but then say how good it is on the other, and that's why you wanted to come here? What's the money? They come for the money. So all right then. So why do Western politicians permit this multicultural separation of the Indian, or any other for that matter, the Indian diaspora? But what got me is the way they're so keen to celebrate the Indians in Australia as a distinct group that must be paid homage to when there's no effort to integrate. Now it's different, and you could say, well, some people say, well, Germans that came to Australia, hundreds of years ago, or 100 years ago, or 50 years ago, whenever it was. They still celebrate things like Oktoberfest, for example. And true, that's true. Oktoberfest is celebrated, but not many folks turn up. And it's not a celebration of Germanness. It's a celebration. There's German food and German beer and all that sort of stuff. But it's a celebration of how the Germans have integrated into this society, and very few of them. Have married other Germans, or yes, some have, of course, but most have integrated. You can't tell, one from another. They were Christian, they were white, they were, and they integrated pretty seamlessly, really. Whereas, and they had no view, a condescending view of the people who were in Australia at the time, or not sufficiently condescending, at least to just not include them in their relationships. The Indians, on the other hand, and you see this on trains or anywhere in bus stops or in out in the street in the shops, the Indians hang around in Indian groups, only Indians, still wearing national Indian dress, even though they've been born in Australia, for goodness sakes. And because they only hang around with other Indians, you'll find someone even born in Australia still has an Indian accent when they talk English. So there's very little integration. There's no desire to integrate, and they're here. Their sole purpose of being in the West, or in Australia in this case, is to take white people's money as much as they can. The idea of spending money on white people is considered as something approaching insanity. So they spend money within their group and with other Indians, and only spend money absolutely when they have to in amongst white people. So they're here to take money, and their view is still, the Indian view of money is still, certainly the ones I met at least, is still that there is a fixed set pot of money in the whole world. It's fixed, absolutely fixed, doesn't change. And the only way you can get more of that is to take from someone else, take what they have, you take their fixed amount and put it into your pocket. And then your fixed amount is now bigger because you've taken some of theirs. That's the view they have. It's the idea of creating wealth creating opportunities that can produce more wealth. They don't just don't get that. They just can't comprehend it. And if you try and explain it, they look at you like you're insane. So that's a little bit about that. But that rather annoyed me. That, I mean, do the Indians celebrate Australia Day in India? Or they got, on the Taj Mahal or any of the other things? Are they running the Australian flag up there? Like, I don't think so. So why is it they're allowed to be nationalist and hang around in a very tight genetic diaspora, but if white people do it, they're evil Nazi fascist Hitlers? I mean, I don't get that, and I don't accept it either. You're being with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.